You're hungry. Genuinely, deeply, uncomfortably hungry. You've been out in the heat all day, you've burned through everything you packed, and the only protein source within a reasonable distance is lying right there on the riverbank, about 4 meters long, prehistoric looking, absolutely motionless in a way that suggests either it's asleep or it's waiting. Either option is statistically bad for you. It's a crocodile. And here's the thought that arrives unbidden in the back of your overheated brain. People eat alligators. That's a thing. Cajun restaurants serve it. It tastes like chicken, allegedly, which is what people say about everything they want you to try without thinking too hard. So, why not crocodile? Why, in a world where humans have figured out how to eat sea urchins and century eggs and something called hakarl, which is fermented shark that smells like industrial-grade ammonia, why has the crocodile largely escaped the global menu? You back away from the riverbank. Slowly. Smart move. But the question stays with you, because it turns out the answer is not simple. The answer involves evolutionary biology, global food economics, cultural history, religion, the peculiar mechanics of crocodilian muscle tissue, farming logistics that would make a reasonable person weep, and at least one country where crocodile is actually considered a delicacy and appears on restaurant menus next to wine pairings. The full story of why humans don't eat crocodiles is, improbably, one of the more fascinating food history tangents available to the curious mind. So let's actually go through it. All of it. Start with the obvious question, the one that should be asked first but rarely is, do people eat crocodile at all? Yes. Absolutely yes. This is not hypothetical. Crocodile meat is consumed regularly in Australia, Southeast Asia, parts of sub-Saharan Africa, the Philippines, and select corners of South America. In Singapore and Thailand, crocodile dishes appear in restaurants without any particular novelty framing. Not as a stunt, not as a challenge food for adventurous tourists, but as an ordinary protein option alongside chicken and pork. In parts of Zimbabwe and Zambia, crocodile has been a component of local diets for centuries. In Australia, crocodile farming is a legitimate agricultural industry, and crocodile meat is exported to Asian markets and sold domestically in supermarkets in certain regions. So the premise of the question needs sharpening. It's not that humans don't eat crocodile, it's that crocodile has not become a mainstream global food source the way that cattle, pigs, chickens, sheep, and even rabbits have. Crocodile meat exists on the margins of the global food system. Present, available, consumed by millions of people, but never achieving the kind of industrial-scale omnipresence that defines what most of the world considers normal protein. Why? That's the real question, and the answer starts much further back than you might expect. Humans and crocodilians have a relationship that predates agriculture by hundreds of thousands of years. Early hominids living near rivers and lakes in Africa would have encountered crocodiles constantly. The Nile crocodile, the saltwater crocodile, and their various relatives were not background scenery in prehistoric Africa. They were active hazards, direct competitors for access to water sources, and occasionally predators of early humans themselves. Crocodile attacks on hominids are documented in the fossil record. Crocodile bite marks appear on ancient bones from early human ancestors, found at sites in Africa dating back millions of years. This was not a neutral relationship. This was a relationship characterized by mutual awareness, mutual danger, and the kind of deeply embedded fear response that natural selection tends to install very firmly when the alternative is being ambushed at the waterhole. The fear of crocodiles that most humans carry, even people who have never encountered one, even people raised in landlocked regions where crocodiles have never existed, has a physical, neurological basis that is ancient beyond description. It is not cultural, it is biological. The same limbic system that fires when you see a spider or hear a sudden loud noise produces a pronounced threat response to crocodilian shapes and movement patterns in the vast majority of humans tested, regardless of their cultural background or prior exposure. You are, at a neurological level, descended from the hominids who were scared of crocodiles. The ones who weren't scared enough are not your ancestors. They became a meal. Natural selection, operating over millions of years on the ancestors of every living human, selected strongly for crocodile avoidance. That selection pressure is baked into your threat detection system with a tenacity that cultural norms cannot fully override. This is, at the deepest level, part of why crocodile has not conquered the global food system. The animal that you instinctively don't want to go near is extremely difficult to domesticate, farm, and process into a convenient grocery store product. The fear is not irrational. It is ancient and extremely well calibrated, and it shapes every layer of the practical challenges that follow. The practical challenges are enormous. Let's be clear about the scale of the problem. Crocodilians are among the most difficult animals to raise in captivity. Not impossible, clearly, since crocodile farms exist, but the difficulty level compared to, say, raising chickens or pigs is roughly comparable to the difference between maintaining a community herb garden and managing a nuclear power plant. Both can be done. The margin for error is somewhat different. First, crocodiles grow slowly. A Nile crocodile takes approximately 5 to 7 years to reach a weight suitable for slaughter. A chicken reaches market weight in 6 weeks. A pig in roughly 6 months. A beef steer in 18 months to 2 years. Crocodiles, operating on a reptilian metabolic timeline that has not been updated since the Cretaceous period, simply do not share the agricultural sector's enthusiasm for rapid turnover. Second, crocodiles eat a lot relative to their meat yield. Their feed conversion ratio, the amount of feed required to produce 1 kilogram of body weight, is significantly worse than that of poultry and moderately worse than that of most red meat animals. And what they eat cannot be grain. Crocodiles are obligate carnivores. You cannot cut feed costs by switching to a corn-based diet. They require protein, specifically animal protein, which means you need to raise or source an additional animal supply just to feed your crocodiles, adding another layer of logistical and economic complexity that would make most agricultural planners immediately start updating their resumes. Third, and this is the part that deserves its own paragraph because it is so fundamentally important, crocodiles actively try to kill people. This is not a niche concern or a hypothetical liability issue. Crocodile farms are hazardous work environments in a category well beyond any other livestock operation. Workers have been killed. Workers have been severely injured. The animals cannot be habituated to human proximity the way cattle cannot be managed with the casual physical contact that makes pig farming or sheep herding relatively safe. Every interaction with a crocodile at close quarters requires either full physical restraint, which requires multiple people and specialized equipment, or a level of personal vigilance that would be exhausting to maintain across an 8-hour agricultural workday. The economic consequence of all these factors is a meat that is dramatically more expensive to produce than any mainstream alternative. Crocodile meat, even in regions where it is farmed commercially, commands prices that place it firmly in the luxury or premium category. It does not compete with chicken at the supermarket. It competes with high-end seafood at the restaurant. That price point limits its audience to exactly the demographic that can afford to think of food as an experience rather than a necessity, which is not the demographic that drives global food production. Now, here is a layer of the story that almost nobody covers when this question comes up: the meat itself. Crocodile meat is good. This is not marketing spin or the enthusiasm of someone who has just eaten something strange and wants to feel good about the experience. Food scientists, chefs who have worked with it extensively, and the populations who eat it regularly are broadly consistent. Crocodile is lean, relatively mild, texturally variable across different parts of the animal, and versatile as an ingredient. The tail meat, which is the most commonly eaten section, and the primary product of commercial crocodile farming, is white, firm, and low in fat. The flavor. Profile is typically described as a mild crossover between chicken and fish, with a texture somewhat similar to a firm whitefish but with more structural integrity. It holds up well to high-heat cooking methods, absorbs marinades effectively, and doesn't have the gamey intensity that characterizes many wild meats. For an animal that looks like a biological weapon and smells like a swamp, the culinary potential is, charitably speaking, not the problem. Other sections of the animal are used differently across cultures. The ribs, backstraps, and body meat tend to be darker, more intensely flavored, fattier, and more suitable for slow cooking or smoking. Some of the adipose tissue has a distinctive flavor that requires culinary management. Not a bad flavor inherently, but one that needs to be worked with rather than ignored. Different farming conditions, diets, and ages of slaughter produce noticeably different flavor profiles, and experienced crocodile cooks adjust their approach accordingly. By the way, if you want to go even deeper into the secret lives of ancient humans, I just launched a full course called The Secret Lives of Ancient Humans. 10 modules, 3+ hours of content covering everything we never talk about on YouTube. What they feared, how they communicated, what hunted them, and much more. Plus an exclusive PDF guide included. Link in the description. See you inside. The point is that the product itself is not the bottleneck. If crocodile meat were disgusting, the story would end there. It is not disgusting. In the right hands, prepared with appropriate technique, it is, by the accounts of people who eat it regularly, quite good. The barriers are structural, economic, historical, and cultural, not sensory. Cultural and religious prohibitions account for a substantial portion of the non-consumption, and they operate across vastly different societies in ways that reveal how universally the crocodile occupies an extraordinary psychological category. In ancient Egypt, the crocodile was divine. Sobek, the crocodile god, patron of the Nile, symbol of pharaonic power, was worshipped, propitiated, and kept in sacred pools at temples. Eating a crocodile in that cultural context was not merely inadvisable from a practical standpoint. It was theologically equivalent to consuming a deity. Sacred crocodiles were mummified with the same care applied to deceased royalty. The reverence was absolute. Across sub-Saharan Africa, numerous ethnic and tribal traditions maintain totemic or ancestral relationships with crocodiles that place them firmly in the category of animals that are not to be consumed. The crocodile as spirit animal, as clan totem, as embodiment of ancestral power, these frameworks appear independently across multiple cultural traditions, likely reflecting the same deep psychological response to the animal that makes it so cognitively prominent in the first place. In Islamic dietary law, crocodilians occupy a contested position. The majority Sunni position holds that crocodile is haram, prohibited, on the grounds that it is a predatory animal with fangs that lives both on land and in water, and therefore prohibited under multiple overlapping categories of Islamic dietary restriction. Given the size of the global Muslim population, this ruling alone removes crocodile from the potential menu for over 1 billion people. Judaism's kashrut dietary laws explicitly prohibit crocodile consumption. It has neither scales in the rabbinic sense, nor does it fit the permitted categories of aquatic animals, and it is clearly not a permitted land animal. Prohibited. Christianity, broadly speaking, does not have categorical dietary restrictions on crocodile consumption, but the cultural inheritance of communities that never ate it, combined with the practical realities of access and economics, produces the same functional result. Most Christians in most parts of the world have never eaten crocodile and have no particular expectation of doing so. Hinduism has regional and sectarian variation, but for the many Hindu traditions that involve restrictions on meat consumption generally, crocodile is comfortably included in the category of things that are simply not on the table, conceptually or literally. When you add up the populations operating under some form of cultural, religious, or traditional prohibition, or simply deep unfamiliarity with crocodile as a food source, you have covered the overwhelming majority of the global human population. The people for whom crocodile is a normal food option are geographically and demographically a small subset of the total. There's another dimension that hasn't come up yet: the ecological reality of crocodilian populations in the wild, and what it means for the feasibility of harvesting them at scale. Many crocodilian species are either currently endangered, have been endangered within living memory, or exist in population numbers that make any suggestion of large-scale commercial harvesting ethically and legally untenable. The saltwater crocodile, the largest living reptile on Earth and the one most frequently discussed in the context of edibility, is legally protected across most of its range. The American crocodile is listed as vulnerable. The Philippine crocodile is critically endangered. The Orinoco crocodile is critically endangered. The Chinese alligator is critically endangered. The American alligator represents the conservation success story of the group, brought back from the brink of extinction through regulatory protection in the 1970s, and now present in sufficient numbers that controlled harvesting is legally permitted in some U.S. states, which is why alligator meat has become available in certain American markets. But the alligator's recovery is the exception, not the pattern. The broader crocodilian family cannot sustain large-scale wild harvest, and farming at industrial scale faces all the economic obstacles already described. The result is a regulatory and ecological landscape in which dramatically expanding crocodile meat production is, at present, a logistically constrained proposition regardless of consumer interest. Wild harvest crocodile hunting, where it occurs legally, is typically quota controlled and produces small volumes of meat that flow into local and regional markets. It is not a scalable model for global food production. Farming is more promising but faces the time, cost, and danger barriers that keep it niche and expensive. Here's something worth appreciating about the animals themselves that adds one more layer to this already layered story. Crocodiles are biologically extraordinary in ways that have begun attracting serious scientific and commercial attention completely separate from the question of eating them. Crocodilian blood contains antimicrobial compounds of remarkable potency. Animals that live in environments teeming with bacteria, that sustain massive physical wounds during territorial combat and territorial fighting, and that heal from those wounds at a rate that seems inconsistent with the filthiness of their habitat, they are doing something immunologically exceptional. Researchers have been investigating crocodile blood proteins as potential sources for novel antibiotics, with early results suggesting properties effective against bacteria that resist standard treatments. Crocodile skin is one of the most commercially valuable leathers on Earth. Hermes, Gucci, Louis Vuitton, the luxury goods industry runs on crocodile and alligator hide to a degree that the average consumer never thinks about. A single high-quality skin can be worth thousands of dollars in the luxury leather market. This economic reality actually supports crocodile farming for the hide industry, and the meat produced as a byproduct of skin farming is what feeds the existing crocodile meat market. The hide is often the primary product. The meat is secondary, which tells you something important about where the value proposition currently lies. Let's address the question that the title implies, but that this entire discussion has been circling. Could we eat crocodile more? Could it become a more significant part of the global food system? The argument in favor is genuinely interesting. Crocodile meat is high in protein, low in saturated fat, contains beneficial fatty acid profiles, and produces meat without the methane output of ruminant animals like cattle. From a nutritional and environmental perspective, it is in several ways a more efficient protein source than beef. Crocodile farming, while difficult, produces less greenhouse gas per kilogram of protein than beef farming. The environmental footprint argument, if taken seriously, is not trivial, but the economic math remains brutal. 5 to 7 years to market weight, obligate carnivore feeding requirements, extreme difficulty of handling, premium land and facility requirements for tropical farming conditions. The cost structure of crocodile meat production does not become competitive with chicken by wishful thinking. It becomes competitive when either chicken becomes dramatically more expensive due to supply disruptions, disease, or regulatory change, or when crocodile farming technology improves sufficiently to reduce the time and cost of production. Neither is impossible. Neither has happened. Consumer psychology is the other wall. Even in wealthy, food-adventurous markets where people are actively looking for sustainable protein alternatives, markets that have embraced insect protein, cultured meat, algae-based food products, crocodile faces the deeply embedded fear response described earlier. The marketing challenge of convincing a suburban grocery shopper to pick up a package of crocodile meat alongside their eggs and yogurt is not trivial. The animal is not associated with food in the mainstream cultural imagination. It is associated with danger, with primordial threat, with the kind of thing that eats you rather than the reverse. Reframing that association requires sustained cultural work of the kind that takes generations, not marketing campaigns. Lobster, famously, was once considered poor people's food. Prison food, in fact. And it took decades of deliberate rebranding by the restaurant industry to transform it into the luxury ingredient it is today. Crocodile would require a similar transformation, against a much stronger headwind of instinctive aversion. And yet, and yet there's something poetically fitting about the crocodile's relationship with human food culture that deserves to be acknowledged before this conversation ends. The crocodile has been on Earth in roughly its current form for approximately 200 million years. It survived the extinction event that eliminated the dinosaurs. It survived multiple mass extinctions that reshaped the planet's biosphere beyond recognition. It outlasted creatures of staggering variety and sophistication. It watched the entire evolutionary history of mammals unfold from the riverbanks of the Cretaceous period. It was there before the first true primates. It was there before the first hominids. It was eating things in the Nile while early humans were still figuring out stone tools. And here it is, in the 21st century, still doing exactly what it has always done, still lying on riverbanks in the same posture it adopted before the first flower bloomed, still ambushing prey at water sources with a technique refined over epochs that make human civilization look like a rounding error. The reason we don't eat crocodile, at the deepest level, is that the crocodile has been winning this particular evolutionary competition for so long that it barely registers our existence as a meaningful challenge. We fear it for very good historical reasons. We cannot farm it cheaply for very good biological reasons. We have surrounded it with religious and cultural prohibitions for very good psychological reasons, and the animal in question continues to sit on its riverbank, absolutely unbothered, having outlasted every predator and environmental catastrophe the planet has thrown at it for 200 million years. The crocodile does not care that we have the internet and satellite navigation and the ability to make crocodile-shaped gummy candies. It cares about the same things it has always cared about: warmth, water, and whatever happens to be within striking distance at the waterline. You, standing on that riverbank at the beginning of this conversation, made the smart call. You backed away. You chose a snack bar or whatever you had in your bag. You made the decision that hundreds of millions of years of predator-prey dynamics have been quietly recommending to your ancestors since before your species existed. The crocodile remains on the menu of a small number of restaurants and farm markets in a small number of countries. It remains a curio, a premium product, a conversation piece, a testament to the adventurousness of certain food cultures and the ingenuity of the farmers and chefs who work with it. But it will not be in your grocery store's meat aisle next to the chicken breasts anytime soon. Not because it's impossible, not because it's inedible, because some animals look at you with those ancient, vertical pupilled eyes and communicate something that bypasses language and culture and rational food economics entirely. Something that says, very clearly, with the authority of 200 million years of successful existence, you should probably eat something else. And somehow, despite everything that makes humans the most adaptively flexible species on the planet, most of us agree.